Nate, thanks for joining me today, man.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, just to give you guys a little bit of background, on episode 9, I had a good friend of mine, Matt Poppert, come on the show, and we talked about some life lessons that he's learned um, throughout his life and time in the Marines and entrepreneurship. And after we got done with that episode, he came to me, the following Monday or so, and was like, "Hey, would you like to be introduced to some other folks that I think would provide really good insight for your show?" And I just have an immense amount of respect for Matt. And so I said, absolutely. And so a little bit of a sidebar, if you're ever, listening to the show and you think that, someone that or yourself would be a good guest, please do reach out. We're always looking for more. But the first person that he introduced me to was Nate here. And I immediately had an immense amount of respect for Nate, just given my relationship with Matt. And then we had a chance to jump on a 30-minute call and get to know each other a little bit. And here we are today. So, Nate, I'm excited about this one. We're going to take it a little bit of a different direction than maybe some of the other episodes that we've done. But maybe just give a little bit of background about yourself for the listeners, and then, we can jump into the theme for today.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jared. Oh, I'm a Gen Xer. How about I start with that so people have an idea how old I am? In my mid 40s. I grew up in Wisconsin, small town, Watertown. It's about a town of 25,000. I live there currently. I moved back here with my wife about 18 years ago. I left town after graduating high school, had an awesome opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy. At the time, I probably didn't fully appreciate all the lessons I was learning, the opportunities I had. But as I've gotten older and through my career, I've looked back and realized it was an awesome opportunity, not just for the education, but just for the personal growth and leadership and some of the challenges and opportunities that setting presents itself. I spent some time in the Air Force and the military, and I got out and I got into the business world. I've had a couple of careers here the last couple of years. I left the military. My old basketball coach had a title company and said, "Why don't you come work for me?" That was not for me. It was pretty painful. Decided to go back and get my MBA at the University of Whitewater, Wisconsin. And then I joined a bank. And as a bank, I worked my way up into a community bank president, joined our board, oversaw our commercial lending. We had several locations. I also oversaw some of our marketing and branding, as well as our consumer products, mortgages, and some deposit parts of the bank. We sold the bank a handful of years ago, and then I had the opportunity to join a family business where I'm currently working. It's called Moss Brothers Construction. I'm one of the partners, and I handle all of our accounting and finance, as well as our business and relationship development, some of our marketing. Like any small business, we've got about 50 employees. I wear many hats, and it's been great to be a part of the business world and bring in some entrepreneurial thinking along with some of my background in the military to help continue to lead the company forward.
Yeah, so let's maybe touch on that military experience just for a minute. What does an opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy look like? Is that something that you sought out, or kind of came to you without much prior thinking on your own, or what did that look like?
Well, my family had a long history of service. My dad was or is a Marine. My grandpa was a Marine. Grandpa was in the Navy. I had an uncle in the Air Force, an aunt in the Army, another uncle in the Navy. So history of service went back a couple of generations. And it was always on my radar as I was growing up. And the academies never were. We live in Wisconsin. I heard of West Point, heard of Annapolis, never really heard of the Air Force Academy. Remember that basketball coach that hired me to work at his title company? He actually was a teacher and said, "Nate, there's a general coming in town. You should listen to him speak. I think maybe your personality, the things you're doing," this is when I was a junior, "would make sense. You might want to learn about it." And so I went there and I just thought, I was always attracted to challenge. I was attracted to service. And I grew up in a blue collar family. My dad's a postman and my mom was a stay at home mom. And I knew that I was going to find a way to, pay for college and find other opportunities in life. And it just seemed like the academy checked a lot of boxes. So in retrospect, I was very fortunate. I had the grades, I had the test scores. I was involved in, as a captain on the football team, basketball team. I was involved in multiple sports and a track team. And so all those things added up. Plus, I had done some service through our church. It just seemed like, I guess, I was in the right place at the right time. And about 30,000 people apply. I had to go through all those processes of passing tests and interviews. We have to get nominated by a local congressman. I was able to get that nomination. And at the end of the day, they accept about 1,300. So you start at 30,000, they whittle it down to 1,300. I feel very fortunate, not only the way I learned about the opportunity, but having had a lot of the requirements, without really trying for it. I feel very fortunate for that too.
Yeah. And how long did you stay in for after?
It was 3 years after.
Okay.
Usually it's a 5-year commitment, but it was funny enough, during the war, they were exceeded congressional mandates for officers because there had been a large ramp up for pilots in the late 90s to early 2000s. And they opened it up to academy graduates. For me, I was never looking at was never a goal of mine to be a retired military member. And I have many friends that have, and, it's awesome for their continued service. For me, it was the opportunity to go somewhere to kind of launch my career and still serve. So 4 years at the academy and then another 3.
Yeah. Well, if I didn't tell you in our intro call, man, thank you for your service. Really appreciate it. And obviously that's how we met Matt as well, or how I've known Matt as a Marine. So what I'm noticing here, and it's kind of the theme as you and I talked about in our intro call, is just this value of service, right? So you talked about serving in high school, obviously served in college and post college, and then kind of entered into this business entrepreneurial world and have had the ability to kind of merge that entrepreneurial and business spirit with service. And it's kind of what I want to talk about today. So maybe provide a little bit of background about your community involvement over the last decade or so, and then we can kind of dive into what that service looks like.
Yeah, Jared, I think, we get very focused on our own lives just as individuals. As you look at your career, you look at your spouse, your kids, whatever that may be. And I think it's important for us as just human beings and as leaders in our community to look beyond ourselves and say, what can I do to help others? And I know people are probably listening, are probably pretty involved. And a lot of times, I've seen other business owners kind of fall back on well, hey, I wrote a check, right? I gave some money. I couldn't be there personally, but hopefully that helps out. And I think that's great, right? I'm not talking either or, but it's definitely an and equation. And so I think writing a check and then investing your time in helping lead in your community is really important. And so for me, leaving the military, as I came back to the community I grew up in, I wanted to see things change, right? And a lot of times people talk about change. Very few people are about change. It takes an effort, a consistent effort to show up and kind of establish a vision, get other people to buy into that vision, and then execute. And a lot of people want to talk about what they want. A lot of people don't want to move forward and work and do the hard work to get there. And I think in our communities, there's a lot of opportunity to serve. And so for me, when I moved back here, it just seemed like there was a gap. And there were people that were moving back to this community at the time that I was aware of, or maybe had never moved but had a business. And I looked at groups that served our community. There were great groups that existed, but I didn't feel like there was groups that I could really be involved with. They were established. They were the Lions clubs, the Rotarians. Those are all great groups, right? And this is not a knock on those groups. But I said to myself, well, I want to see a positive change for this community, and it's not necessarily tied to any one of those beliefs. It's just in general, like, how do we improve the vitality of this community? How do I get other business leaders to think and share ideas? And so I reached out to some guys I knew. I played morning basketball at 5 a.m. There's a few business owners there, a few couple guys I knew, and said, hey, why don't we start a group that's just really focused on this mindset? And we called it Yes Watertown, YES, exclamation point, with the idea it was like, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can be that. We're in an older community, but at the same time, doesn't mean that we can't hold on to that heritage of fellowship and connectedness, and also back to that and equation, and bring in some new ways of thinking and being proud of where we're at and creating some social changes that can impact lives. And so that was really, back to service, like looking at that opportunity. And I think anybody that has a business, they're entrepreneurial in the sense of how they think and how they view the world. And they're not afraid to take risks. They're not afraid to try new things, understanding that some things work, some things don't, but we're going to learn from them and we're going to keep getting better. And really, that was the approach we took with this group. There were a bunch of rules, or we didn't have a bunch of bylaws. It was, hey, we all want to see the community get better. And that word, it's somewhat nebulous. It just, we wanted vitality. And we thought, okay, let's just try some things and let's start making connections and talking and sharing ideas. And what are you passionate about? And I would share what I'm passionate about. And how can we mutually reinforce that and support each other? And so it wasn't like a group that we were creating causes. It was, there are plenty of causes in our community. We all can list them, whether it's homelessness, whether it's neglect, maybe children not getting fed. If you look at, the percentage of free lunches in your area, there's a million things that we can all take up for, and they're all great. And so it's more about, these all exist. Let's bring them to the top, to the surface. Let's create awareness among some of us in the community that we feel we can make a difference. And then let's, mutually reinforce and support each other to move forward and try and make a change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's really how that leadership started in my community.
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind as you're kind of talking through that is I think, and this isn't a podcast directed at millennials or anyone my age. It's just kind of more broad than that. But I think folks my age tend to have this worldview a little bit more, and it becomes really difficult to say, see how we can make an impact because we're focusing on kind of this worldview. Whereas you've taken a stance, and I'm from a small town, so I think you and I have a similar view here of, you can make an impact within your community. So do you have any advice to maybe to those people that, want to make a difference? They just feel like they don't have the ability to, because they're maybe focusing on too big of a picture?
Yeah, that's a great point there. I think, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
And so globally speaking, yeah, I don't know what I can impact globally, but I know what my neighbor looks like. I know what my neighbor's kids look like. And I know what the guy down the street and his family looks like. And so it's simple. There's nothing rocket science. How do you get started? Take action.
Yeah.
It sounds simple. Whatever group, there's groups that exist. So reach out. I tried to join some groups. I knew they weren't for me. I know my style. I know what I wanted to accomplish. It wasn't a fit, therefore I created. However, maybe there's a group that's already a fit. Show up. And when I mean show up, I think it's like, people say they want to be a part of something and they come to a meeting or two, or they sit there. But what I mean show up, I mean show up with an intent, right? My intent is to be a part of this. My intent is to contribute. My intent at the end of the day is to impact people's lives positively. If you show up with that intent, I think you will find opportunity. People smell out fake all day. And and even the group I started, we had a couple people that wanted to join. They were joining because they saw some of the things that we were involved in, and they saw our membership. And our membership for our community, we pretty much touched everything from a hospital, CEO to a school board member, and in between, school principals, business owners. We built a very strong group of individuals that wanted to see change. people started saying, hey, I want to be a part of that. Well, it's pretty evident to most of us when they'd show up once in a while, they weren't active, they didn't have their own ideas. And so, whatever you do, just show up with the intent and just the focus and say, I want to be a part of this and contribute. You got to take the first step.
Yeah, I love that because specifically as it relates to myself, one of my 2024 motto was show up, and I think I stopped too short there. It's show up with intent. So I think that's applicable to other areas of your life. So we talked a little bit about you, or at least you mentioned, one of the three T's, the treasure, and going beyond that, and then we've kind of talked on about time as well. So then let's maybe go towards talent a little bit, right? Because we all have um, different things that we're talented at or passionate about, and we can utilize that in our community. Especially as it relates to business owners and folks that are generally going to be listening to this episode. So maybe talk about finding what you're passionate about. Maybe you don't get to scratch that itch in your day-to-day job, or maybe you just don't get to fully utilize what you feel like you're talented at and the business that you own. How important is that to find out, hey, how can I best impact the community that I serve?
Yeah, great question. I had an awesome mentor, friend of mine, the CEO of our bank. When he hired me, I wasn't in banking. I'd come from the military side of things, and he took a risk. And he always talked about leading into your strengths. And so he was a big, strengths finder. A lot of people listening probably have heard about that book. I wasn't a big believer in assessments, but he gave me the book. I breezed through it. It's pretty short, it's simple, but the assessment was spot on. And so I think, first of all, if you're not familiar with what your strengths are, you might know what they are, maybe you haven't maybe articulated them. I think strength finders, I don't get paid for them. It's a very cost effective, simple, direct way to maybe help you articulate what those strengths are. So, one, clearly understand them. Two, I think you have to set ego aside because at the end of the day, we have to be involved as entrepreneurs, as business leaders in our community, but it's not about us, right? So if we're going to join a group, what is that group trying to accomplish? How do I bring and contribute my strengths to this organization, to this cause, or maybe it's a one-off committee, whatever that situation is. But it's not about you and your strengths, it's about, okay, how do I bring them forward and help this group? Because I think I have seen it too, where people want to exert, right, and demonstrate. And I think that it's important that you got to be very careful. It's a fine line, right? So pride is observed, and or pride is announced, confidence is observed. And I think you can be confident and bring your strengths to the table and still accomplish a goal. So for me, something of mine is activity. I'm an activator. I'm not the person that wants to farm and manage a program or a project. I want to take it from it's in the ground, it's in early, conception or preconception, and take it and get it off that ground and get it to maybe it's 70%. I don't care about the last 30%. To me, the intrigue and I think my strengths lend to let's just create. And so I try and find opportunities that allow me to create. One of them, our mayor had a vision for a downtown. There were 5 existing, buildings on this block. He's like, I think we need a town square, something to bring our community together, something unique, something that's not in the area. And I was attracted to that cause because I believe in connection. I believe in people in our community, giving people a reason to come out, bond, interact. And it sets us apart from maybe other communities in our area. And we're kind of between Milwaukee and Madison. We're equidistant, so we're kind of this flyover part of Wisconsin. People don't really stop here unless you're from here or one spouse works in Milwaukee, one works in Madison. So I bought into his vision, but he needed a group of people and he needed some local business people to really drive it home. It wasn't going to be local elected officials. And so, we met, and I just said, I'm willing to take that risk. And I'm willing, at the time I was the bank president, I'm like, I'll take that risk. Let me reach out to people I know that I can bring on board and say, hey, I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know how long this is going to take. We've got some dollars. We probably don't have enough, but let's go figure it out. And that's what we did. We figured it out. Now, it took us, from the day we started talking to the day we did the grand opening last May. That was almost a 9-year odyssey, as I call it. It sometimes felt like a Sisyphean effort, based on public backlash. One of the buildings was the local newspaper, and people were thinking, oh, you're taking buildings down in our downtown and it's hurting our tax base. Why are we doing this? And we just said, okay, I went out and recruited the right people. Talk about putting ego aside. I became the vice chair, not the chair. There was someone that said I met with, and I thought their skill set exceeded mine. And what we needed is, he literally said, I'll do this if I can be chair. And he didn't say it egotistically, but he said it confidently. And I thought, you know what? I need this person on my team to get us to where we want to go. And I said, that's fine. He goes, you're fine not being the chair. I said, I don't care about titles. I care about results, right? And him and I built a great relationship. You know what? He was the right person. And he sat in that chair for the majority of it. The last year and a half, I switched over. His business just took off. He couldn't do it anymore. But it's an example of a project that was about a $6 million project. People told us it would never happen. We had about $2 million in funds, so we had to raise the rest of it. And we raised it through various sources, through relationships we had with businesses, through the government, that we had a relationship through the government, through the DNR. And, at the end of the day, it's an asset that has really flourished. We're coming up on the first year anniversary. They're doing some big things with the space. And again, I never had the passion to manage something. So once we opened it, within 2 months, and the mayor knew we resigned. Myself and the other business owners resigned. But I share the story because it takes a lot of people to have a social impact in your community. And it also takes risk. It takes creative thinking. There are strategies that we would deploy that I don't believe would have been deployed by others that haven't ever taken risk before. And we were a team. It was a team effort. We assembled 5 individuals that we thought could contribute because we knew what the end looked like, right? We had this vision. We knew what the end goal was going to be. We just didn't know how we were going to get there. We had to chart our own course. And sure, there are some things we could have probably, in retrospect, done faster, better, smarter. But that's part of creation, is you go through those learning experiences. And at the end of the day, it's that journey. And when you get to the end, it's great. And not all things were successful, but the majority were, and we got it done.
Yeah, I love to find similarities in these conversations that I'm having from people that have different backgrounds or experiences or journeys. And I had one of my colleagues on, I think it was episode 3, Abhishek Mathur, and was asking his advice for folks that are trying to break into real estate. And he said, essentially, you can plan, you can do all these things, you can bring different types of experience, but at the end of the day, you have to just make the decision to do your first deal. And you can't really break into real estate until you decide to do that. And what I love about what you just said is that a lot of us sit back and say, I would love to have involvement in my community. I would love to make a difference. But then that's where it stops. And sometimes you just have to make the decision to do it, which it sounds like, kind of where you guys were on this community involvement for the city.
Yeah, pick up the phone, ask somebody that you know, what do you do? What do you give? Just start getting active, because I think once you're active, you learn more, right? You get more information. You're kind of looking through like a keyhole before you get active. And as you get active, all of a sudden that perspective broadens and you meet people, you learn about opportunities, and then, you realize maybe where I fit. But until you start dipping your toes in the water, you don't really know.
Yeah.
This is my opinion, right? And so I think, to your point, start small. I mean, we're not trying to accomplish something tomorrow. And I wouldn't have known, first of all, I wouldn't have had this opportunity had I not started getting involved 5 years previous to this. But because I had been involved and I met people and I talked, this opportunity came up. And then I had another opportunity. We have a health foundation, sold our hospital as a community hospital, monetized it for about 60, 70 million. We've had a great market. Now it's 100 million plus, right? I would not have had the opportunity to be on that board and create further social impact and change and be a part of that team had I not gotten involved previously. So you just don't know where these things lead. And I think that you take the step, you don't have to know. I've also found everyone wants to plan. I'm not an anti-planner. Don't get me wrong. Like, we're in construction, right? Pre-planning is really important. It helps avoid pitfalls, saves costs, identifies, choke points in your timeline. But there's a point where planning prevents you from action. And you need to say, you know what? You can overplan. Like anything, there's law of diminishing returns. Don't be an overplanner. Don't overthink it. Especially we're talking about community involvement here. I mean, take the step out there, make the introduction, show up, because the more you plan, the more you think. I think the more it paralyzes you, and you can find a lot of reasons why. I mean, honestly, if I had probably really thought down and overthought that whole let's take on this town square, there have been a lot of reasons to say no. There was risk. I had a customer, take accounts out of our bank who picketed me at the bank. We had people, online and in public calling us certain names or saying things to people that we were related to or worked with. But at the end of the day, I knew we were doing it for the right reasons. I didn't think about all those things. Not that I wasn't aware of them, but I didn't sit there and just meditate on the negative. I meditated on what I want this to look like 10 years from now. I can withstand all that other stuff. We can always solve for money. That's easy, right? I mean, sounds easy, but you can still solve for it. It's not like this impossible riddle or puzzle that you can't figure out. You just got to put the time and the effort to find the right people, get the right people on your team, engage the right groups. So again, plan all you want, just do.
Yeah, let's maybe stay there for a minute, because you said, you can meditate on the negative all you want. And I think what holds a lot of people back is, especially those that have been successful in the business world, is a fear, right? Don't want to be seen as any sort of failure within the community that they have high standing in. Um, how do you get over that? Especially when thinking about, doing it for the right reasons, knowing that um, the vision that you have, or the direction that you want to go, or the impact that you want to have is, something that means something to you, is important, is positive, but yet there's that fear kind of holding you back, whatever it may be, whether it's perception or pride or, some other type of fear that you just can't seem to get over.
Yeah, I think for me, talking with people I respect, getting their thoughts. Hey, I'm thinking about this is important, because those are the opinions that matter most. There's always going to be negative opinions about all of us, the people that work with us, that work for us, we work with in the community. Not everyone's going to like you. It doesn't mean at the end of the day you're a failure. So I think that's important. One, get some good positive feedback, or at least bounce ideas off people to respect and see what their thoughts and opinions are. Even more so than that, though, is why are you doing it? If you're doing it for you, and it's probably too short-sighted. There's got to be a bigger play here. There's got to be about people around you. You're doing it to better others. If you can truly say, I'm doing it to better others, I think that's most important. That's paramount, because at the end of the day, you're not going to fail. You're going to move that needle, whether it's, 10 clicks to the right, or it's 20 clicks, or you get it 180 degrees in the right direction, whatever that is, you're going to move it. And so I think that's paramount. Then talking to those people you trust. And then ultimately, for me, I guess it just came down to do it the right way. So you're doing it for others for the right reason. You've got some people you trust and getting their kind of perspective. And then you're going to do it the right way. I mean, do it the right way is you're going to honor those that are involved. You're going to be transparent. You're putting your ego to the side. you're including and encouraging others to share their perspective, let them take some leadership in whatever tasks come up to accomplish your goal. It's the things that leaders do. And so if you do it the right way, at the end of the day, maybe you don't get to that summit. You get damn close. Well, guess what? Everyone's at the base of the mountain. Nobody got it up to the summit without you getting involved. So is that really failure? I mean, I want to go all cliche, Giannis Antetokounmpo on everybody, since he is a great basketball player in Milwaukee. They asked him last year about failure, in the playoffs, and he goes, "Is there failure?" Well, I mean, in sports, it's a little different, but I mean, in community service, is there a failure if you're showing up? You wanted to raise 100,000, you raised 70. Now put your ego to the side. You still got 70. I don't know. I guess that's how I view the world.
Yeah, amen. And that was a great clip. If you haven't seen it, go back and YouTube that one, because he provided a great insight there that maybe not all professional athletes do. Let's talk about authenticity for a little bit. I've talked about this on the show a couple of different times within the business world. You mentioned it at the beginning, and then you brought up again, pride is announced, confidence is observed. Um, let's talk about, the authenticity behind, doing it for the right reasons, doing it to serve others, and then relate it to, kind of this whole idea of shooting for the moon and you'll hit the lamppost, which is a quote that Matt said on his episode. So it's fresh in my mind considering
That's
that one
funny.
was released yesterday. How do you kind of focus on that authenticity within the community service world?
I've never been asked that or thought about it from that perspective, Jared. Well, I think, first of all, authenticity starts with knowing yourself, right? That's been going on since the early days of philosophy. And we go back to the Greek islands, right? I mean, know thyself. I think that if you understand what your strengths are, you know how you can relate to people and communicate with people. And then from there, I think it's just being authentic to saying, okay, what do I care about? What's important to me? Whether it's, we got a great group in our town that said we wanted to clean up the river and they wanted to restock fish and make a better ecosystem. Well, that's important. That's as important as trying to solve hunger. I mean, I don't want to assign value to these things that we do for others. They're all important. So I guess what know yourself and then say, okay, where do I work well? Where's my knowledge base even? Because those strengths are going to point you in that direction. Maybe you're more analytically minded. There might be a group in town that really needs a phenomenal treasurer that can look at this small, non-for-profit. It's kind of been running like, hey, a local lady offered her time or gentleman offered their time and they're running like their own checkbook. Well, you've got perspective, you've got analytical skill sets. Maybe there's some things we can do to make our money work better for us. Maybe we should be managing our processes better, our controls better. So I think know yourself, then look at how do I apply that? What organizations exist? What do I care about? And maybe within that, where do my skills come into play? I think that's being authentic. When I say people can smell when you're just showing up for you, I mean, there are some organizations or events that take place that it always seems like that person's in the photo. That person's always like, hey, I want to be the MC. I want to be the face of this. I want to be that. They're showing up for these high vis opportunities, but they're not putting the work in behind the scenes. And people can see that very quickly. And so I think that's just being authentic. You don't always have to be out front and out loud and beat the drum for yourself. I think it feels good. It's okay. But in the long run, that's short-sighted. And that's where I think that you end up hurting a cause more than helping a cause. And so I think that's really, to me, that's what being authentic is about. Sure, do I end up in a photo or two? Yeah. Are there plenty of times I don't go? Yes. And sometimes it's because I'm making that effort to say, I don't need to be in it. I don't need to be seen that way right now because that's not most important. Or this other individual or this group needs to have their reputation elevated, or they need to be associated with that effort. So I think that's just being authentic to me. I I don't know how else to really describe it in a community sense other than, you know, show up with that intent of doing right by others.
Yeah, I think that may end up being the title for the episode is show up with intent. I do want to talk about, so you kind of mentioned there the whole idea of assigning value, and I think in business and in life, whatever it is that you're passionate about, I'm passionate about working out. I love to find ways to compete either with myself or with others. Um, in community service, though, that competition probably needs to be removed. So in terms of, this whole idea of assigning value, how do you overcome, if you're a competitive person, how do you overcome that whole idea of like, hey, I need to, compete with, another organization or that does a similar thing that I do, or someone else that can be seen as a competitor within my industry that is involved in a separate organization.
Yeah, I call that don't be a victim of scarcity thinking. People that think like that think there's one pie and there's only so many pieces, and that's the only pie that exists. Be the abundant thinker, right? If there's other pies we can make. Maybe there's only one pie today, but why don't we make a second and a third pie? Or why don't we find a way to continue to share this recipe so that others are making pies too? And so an example would be this. That town square, what was going on in our community is really interesting is town square is a big investment. It's very political. At the same time, our library wanted to do an expansion. And the library expansion was like $10 million. And we talk about this town square that we got $4 million gap we got to figure out. So there's, some serious dollars in a community our size. Many of those listening thinking no big deal. Well, our size, those are big dollar amounts in a community of 25,000 people. We don't have major corporations. We got small business owners, but we've got some finite resources to a degree. And a lot of conversations started around, well, how are we going to raise this money? Because if we ask them for money at the library, you're taking opportunities from us at the town square, right? And it's an easy fallacy to fall into. It's the if I take from you, therefore I cannot have, versus, well, if we share a great vision and how these work together, maybe person that gives to you will give to me too. It's not an either or. It might be that back to and equation. And
Mhm.
so I think that as we lead in our community, and maybe you're in a bigger community and you've got somebody at a competitor, and they're on this board or on that board, and they're raising these dollars. You got to get out of that scarcity thinking and say, okay, I'm an abundant thinker. There are other opportunities. I'm going to share the values of our organization. I'm going to share the values of why we're making this change, because I think like attracts like. I value what you believe. I want to be a part of that. And so you need to lead with what you value and why you value it and what it's going to mean for others, because people get attracted to that kind of energy. And so that would be my response is I'm never thinking about how much we raised versus they raised. I'm thinking about, hey, again, it's about others. So what do we have to do to create this opportunity for others to bring the resources to bear, to bring the focus, the strength, that collaborative effort? I'm talking about that energy, right? And that's infinite if you find the right people and if you're doing it for the right reasons, if you're sharing it and you're living it, basically do things the right way, your values come out. What do you value? You do value input because we've seen that you've made the effort to be at tables with different groups. We want to be a part of that. And so I think that's what really creates success long term is how do I keep generating this flywheel of shared values, shared vision, getting people engaged, bringing in new energy. That's going to get you over the finish line faster than I got to take more of the existing real estate pie and dollars, because if I don't get them first, someone else will get them. Right. So it's a world view. You got to put a different filter on how you view it. And I think that even applies to business. I don't get too wrapped up in competitors in the business world. Why? Why am I focused on the competitors? What are we doing? Are we, am I benchmarking me? Are we showing up every day intentionally trying to get better? Have we intently thought about our practices, our policies, our communication approach? Have we intended to communicate that to our employees or not, to our customers or not. Some things happen by happenstance. I liked us to, are we actually having discussions? Why do we do that? Why is that important? So, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, you got to run a business in the sense of I'm value driven. Everything I do is around that. So I'm talking to customers. I'm not selling customers on our service. I'm selling customers on who we are and our team. If you believe what you believe, you value what we value, we're a right fit for you. We're going to get you to the finish line. That to me is a much more holistic approach, but it's more to me the right approach. Otherwise, you're commoditizing yourself, right? And that doesn't work long term, in my opinion.
Yeah, amen. And I was kind of hoping you would go there. Just like I said, I like to find similarities in different podcast episodes. I think organizations, companies, people have a lot more in common than they realize, especially in this world of media landscape trying to be divisive. You have a lot more in common with your neighbor next door, and there are ways where situations can be very mutually beneficial, and specifically so within community service here, as we're trying to do good and do what we feel is positive within our world. So Nate, man, this is great. I can't wait to share it because I think it is important. And the only thing I would maybe touch on before we wrap up is speak to those people that, and this includes myself, just for full transparency, that have been involved in the past, right? And then life happens because we get busy and we get focused on ourselves, like you said at the beginning, and just need to get back into it. So that whole do it mentality, what else do you add to those folks that have been involved, have served in the past? Life happened and they got distracted, and now it's time to kind of jump back in.
Yeah, I would say just, life's about seasons. Life's about cycles. And it's okay if you're not always on. We all have challenges we face, or we have other things we have to prioritize. And that's okay. I've stepped back from some things as well over this last year, since the last decade of being ultra involved. And part of that was just to catch my breath and say, okay, what am I passionate about next? Where can I make a difference? I think that's okay. Don't heap judgment on yourself or feel like, oh man, I'm not doing something. I think we get caught up looking at social media, looking at our friends updating us in their Christmas newsletter and their photo and all the things they're doing. And then we start feeling bad for ourselves, or we assign guilt. Don't do that. Just say, okay, I needed a break. I need to recharge. I had to reprioritize. That's all fine. Now, I guess my only advice would be like, okay, now you're in the sidelines. You've got those great experiences from the past. You've got some maturation and new life experiences. Just find out what's coming up. What can I get involved with? And to me, it's like, start small, back to eating the elephant, it's one bite at a time. So you don't have to jump in and all of a sudden say, oh, I'm going to be on this chair, or I'm going to be this, officer level. Show up. And once you start doing, people really latch onto you. That's what I found. Yeah. If you show up and you want to be a part of something, it becomes pretty apparent. You don't have to announce it. They'll say, hey, would you want to be involved with this? Would you mind spending some time here? Could I grab you a coffee and talk to you about this idea? And that's where it goes. And if it's not that, I don't know, maybe there's something in your community, maybe in your neighborhood that you see is available. Like, oh man, everybody's been complaining about too many cars speeding down the road. Okay, fine. Go put some signs together, knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, let's put this sign up that says, remember, kids are here playing, drive slow. Like, that sounds silly, but it's simple, it's effective, and you're still serving others.
Yeah, and that authenticity is contagious. Nate, thank you, man. This is great. Y'all, if you want to get in touch with Nate, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Nate?
Yeah, I'm not a big social influencer type person. So just I've got an email address, and that's that's SALAS 15@me.com. Even text me. I'll give you my phone number on here, 920 248-1913. Shoot me a message like, hey, I heard you in the podcast. I got some questions, whatever. I'll respond. And, I'm not very active anywhere else.
Yeah, I may have to introduce you. So just a little side note, we can talk about this offline. But my uncle is the mayor of my hometown now, and they're kind of going through, what it sounds like what you guys went through in your town. They're trying to revitalize the downtown, and they made a lot of good strides. But I think more resources and more experiences, the better. So may have to make the introduction there. But again, thank you for the time, and we'll chat.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.